My name is Brace Draper, and I'm 27 years old. I'm married to a beautiful and cheerful woman named Shelly Draper, who's just a year younger than me. We've been married for 5.25 years, so everything is still relatively new. Every marriage has its bumps in the road, and I want to share a story about how ours almost hit a major pothole. I was reading an interesting online article about how new data from various scientific satellites is changing our understanding of space. It struck me how fluid our perception of truth can be. Universities and textbooks present theories as facts, which are later overturned by new discoveries. Yesterday's experts fade into obscurity, replaced by new authorities. I was pondering this, and the vastness of the universe, when my wife, Shelly, whom I'd been committed to for over 5 years, walked into the living room. She declared, quite matter-of-factly, that she was going on a date with a male colleague this Friday. It was unexpected, out of character, and completely unlike her. Her stance, hand on hip, with an expression that dared me to object, even though her mind was clearly made up, left me bewildered. Shelley enjoys a good debate, and I often find her logic questionable. However, I've been worn down by her tenacity in arguments. She rarely yields until she's victorious, which happens frequently. But we'd never clashed over something this potentially explosive. What was I supposed to do? She went on, explaining that this didn't mean she loved me any less, and that it shouldn't impact our relationship. She'd simply decided to explore her sexuality, meet new men, and broaden her horizons. She acknowledged that it might upset or hurt me, but assured me she'd always return to me, remaining my wife forever. This wouldn't change anything between us. We were forever, an amazing team, and she believed this could ultimately strengthen our bond. Perhaps she even suggested she might pick up a few tricks to enhance our intimacy. I sat there speechless, fighting the urge to react violently. A torrent of responses flooded my mind: strangle her, beat her senseless, threaten divorce, threaten mayhem. Yes, mayhem was high on the list. I could cry, gnash my teeth, make her gnash her teeth. Mayhem. Or just walk away. Argue, argue, argue. As her rehearsed monologue, I was convinced it was scripted, practiced, maybe even co-written, concluded. A thought struck me. This changes the rules of our game. We needed new parameters. How could I make her understand my perspective? This thought sparked a memory of Tom Sawyer's fence-painting strategy. Mark Twain's character made a tedious chore desirable by manipulating his friend's perceptions. Perception is reality. This epiphany changed everything. Armed with this new insight, I turned away, feigning deep contemplation. Then, widening my eyes, I beamed with enthusiastic approval. "That's fantastic! Brilliant idea! This Friday, you say?" "Wow, I never considered that possibility. Let's do it." Shelley seemed slightly taken aback by my agreement, her brow furrowing in surprise. She recovered quickly and mumbled, "Oh, you're cool with it? I'm glad you agree." This went better than I expected. I thought you'd be angry. A hesitant smile touched her lips, but she still looked perplexed. I stood, took her hands, grinned broadly, and gazed into her eyes. "No. This is wonderful news. I'm thrilled. Relieved, even. There's this lovely woman I've bumped into at the gym a few times. She's made it pretty clear she's interested." I gently let her down, explaining I'm married and not looking to cheat. But now, this opens up all sorts of exciting possibilities. I can't wait to tell her we're open to exploring things. "Thank you. Thank you." I almost burst out laughing at the shock that drained the color from her face. I strolled towards the kitchen, hiding my smirk, and called over my shoulder, "I'll get some mineral water. Do you want anything?" "No, thanks," came the strained reply, laced with uncertainty and confusion. This was so much better than violence, and no jail time either. Standing before the wall calendar, I muttered theatrically, "So, tomorrow's Wednesday, and she usually comes in early on Wednesdays. I'll need to get to the gym extra early to catch her. I hope she's still interested and hasn't moved on. Let's see if she's free this Friday. Damn, I hope she is. This could be amazing. I love her. luxurious chest. I'm going to... until we both collapse. Yeah, this is just too perfect. I need to pack my gym bag and throw it in the car. Probably should wear some nice aftershave. Friday, baby, you and me. Oh yeah! I sipped my water, eyes on the calendar, but my attention was focused on Shelly's reaction from the corner of my eye. She was frowning. Not part of the plan. What, sweetheart? She remained silent, but her agitated breathing and demeanor spoke volumes. Good. Returning to the couch, I pretended to continue reading the article, but my focus drifted. I was more preoccupied with Shelly, noticing her evident discomfort without directly looking at her. I hoped she was formulating a response, considering the arguments she anticipated from me and how to articulate them without appearing hypocritical. I let her wrestle with that. Eventually, after a period of silence, she sighed deeply and said, I'm tired. I think I'll go to bed. Will you be joining me soon? Yes, I replied. I think I'll finish this article in about half an hour and then come up. Good night, Shelly, I said. She gave me a quick kiss and turned toward the stairs leading to our bedroom. Turning back, she said, I love you, Brace. A potent mix of profound hurt, disappointment, and sadness washed over me. This was a serious turning point, and many of the paths ahead seemed fraught with difficulties. As I sat there, I replayed the past few weeks in my mind. I was inclined to believe Shelly, perhaps overly trusting, and had likely overlooked several potential red flags. I felt it was time to adopt a more analytical approach to the situation. While I couldn't pinpoint any definitive proof of infidelity, a few nagging doubts lingered. Phone calls and text messages had become unusually private. When I inquired about recent calls made in secluded areas of the house, she claimed they were from her sister, explaining that her privacy was paramount. I accepted her explanation, but the frequency and secrecy felt unusual. Previously, calls to and from her sister were always conducted when we were together, and afterwards, she'd share family news, fostering light-hearted laughter. There had been no secrets before now. Recent texts, it seemed, had prompted smiles and quiet giggles. It was time for a discreet investigation. While Shelly was getting ready for bed, I accessed her mobile phone's call logs. Over the past 2 weeks, there were 4 calls and 6 text messages from an unknown number during evening hours. To be certain, I checked her contact list for her sister's number. It wasn't the same. I noted the unfamiliar number, and on a whim, attempted to trace it online. The number was linked to someone named Jason Marston, and the information included his address. He lived in our city. I noted the address. Next, I logged into Shelly's company website. She worked as the head of human resources at Maple Brothers Engineering and Design. Accessing her account, I reviewed her permissions. She had access to the company employee database, a feature I'd assisted her with in the past. It took a moment to verify, but I found that Jason Marston had been employed at Maple Brothers for only 7 months. That was all the confirmation I needed. He was calling and texting my wife, and definitely not her sister. The future of our marriage hung precariously in the balance. If she had indeed engaged in infidelity with him, our relationship would be irrevocably damaged. I accessed her email account. The fact that her password remained unchanged brought a momentary sense of relief. While no emails directly from Jason appeared, a search for his name revealed several pertinent messages. A woman named Darcy Sears had informed Shelly that Jason was inquiring about her and trying to obtain her personal details. Darcy had told Shelly that Jason considered her attractive and wanted to sleep with her. Darcy, seemingly supportive of Jason, had encouraged Shelly to pursue the relationship. The emails between them were laced with flirtatious comments, and Darcy repeatedly encouraged Shelly to make it happen. Shelly claimed that she had not yet agreed to meet Jason, but Darcy had urged her to consider a first date that weekend. Distracted, I wandered around aimlessly gathering my gym clothes, making enough noise to let Shelly know my intentions. I packed them into the car for tomorrow. The gym would be a distraction, a formality. I prepared for bed, but sleep evaded me, my mind consumed by our future. Wednesday morning dawned early. I got up, humming cheerfully, and headed for the gym. I worked out without talking to anyone. Then I went to work, as usual. I tried to keep my thoughts on the task at hand, but the unspoken turmoil at home lingered. I worked effectively and earned my paycheck. Returning home, my car pulled into the garage. Shelly's car was already there. Touching the hood, I felt its warmth. She had arrived shortly before me. I paused at the kitchen door, took a deep breath, and prepared to maintain my new facade. Opening the door, I smiled and greeted my wife with a casual hello and headed toward the bedroom, removing my tie and jacket as I walked. Ascending the staircase, I called out over my shoulder, "Shelly, could we have a conversation about this weekend? I believe we should establish some ground rules going forward to ensure we're both on the same page." Shelly replied, "Yes, I think we should. I've already placed an order for Chinese food. Hopefully that's all right with you." Her voice wavered, as if she was unsteady. The evening held the promise of intrigue, tinged with anticipated friction. I could already sense the tension, both hers and mine. Back in the kitchen, now dressed casually in jeans and a t-shirt, I saw the food had arrived. We began filling our plates from the small cardboard containers. As we did, I started, "Since you've had some time to process this weekend's plans, and I've just recently become aware of our new relationship dynamic, I've jotted down some thoughts and even created a flowchart." I grinned. "You can remove the man from programming, but you can't remove the programming from the man. To prevent us from irritating each other to the point of homicide, I've outlined a few rules I'd like to discuss, refine, and mutually agree upon. This seems like the most logical approach. I don't want our extramarital affairs to ruin us." Shelly gasped audibly, her eyes widening in surprise, a reaction I chose to ignore. "Yes, we can discuss it," she responded softly, her voice fading. "Let me understand what you mean." "Well, for instance," I continued, "and I'm sure this is crucial, no games within these walls. We should both acknowledge and respect that this is our shared space and ours alone. Secondly, no disrespect towards one another when we're with our other sexual partners." She gasped again. "It's simply impolite and will damage us in the long term. Thirdly, our shared activities and plans take precedence. We shouldn't cancel or alter our arrangements just to accommodate a lover. And finally, no deception between us. Lies and dishonesty will ultimately destroy us. These are just a few initial ideas, so I'd like us to agree on some boundaries like rational adults. What are your thoughts?" We were already seated at the table and Shelly nearly choked on her food. Reality seemed to be a difficult pill to swallow. "Good. I have reservations about all of this." "I don't know. It's becoming overly complicated," Shelly said quietly, focusing on her plate. At that moment, my phone rang. Glancing at the screen, I raised my eyebrows in vague recognition. "Hold that thought. I need to answer this. I'll be right back." I quickly entered our small office, closed the door to prevent eavesdropping, set my phone to record, and answered in a hushed tone. "Hello?" The caller spoke with a thick accent from the Indian subcontinent. "Hello, Mr. Draper. This is the IRS." "Yes? And we have found that you owe us $1,326 in unpaid taxes from 2021. "Hi. I'm so glad you called." "Yes, I'm really excited about Friday night. What time works for you?" I glanced at the light under the door and noticed two shadows the size of small feet. Shelly was listening. "What Friday are you talking about?" "This is serious. You owe us $1,026, and if we don't receive payment immediately, we will send the police to arrest you." "Great. That works for me too. I'll pick you up from your apartment and take you to a nice restaurant for dinner, and then we can head back to your place for the rest of the night. What kind of food do you like?" "I'm so glad you're still interested in being my sex partner. You really turn me on. We're not going on a date. We'll send the police to arrest you if you don't go and buy gift cards for the amount of $1,326 and give us the card numbers. Do you really think this is some kind of joke?" "Oh, you naughty girl. Yes, of course we can skip dinner and just eat at your place, but I want to treat you properly, which is why I suggested going out for dinner. The whole weekend? We can arrange that too, if we both decide that's what we want. Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. What's wrong with you? When the police arrive, I'll make sure they teach you some manners. This is very serious. You're going to regret this. I laughed. All right, I promise I'll treat you right. Straight in your bed. You're driving me crazy. The caller's frustration was palpable. Screw you, idiot. The police are already on their way. You'll regret ever dealing with me. By the time you get out of prison, you'll be an old man. Thanks for calling. You made my evening. I'm looking forward to Friday. Sleep well and dream of me. Bye-bye, darling. I ended the call, although I think they hung up first. What a delightful conversation. It felt like a ménage à trois. I had to compose myself to avoid bursting into laughter. Opening the door, I saw Shelly's face, ashen and pale. Who was that? I restrained myself from saying Jake from State Farm. Instead, I told the truth, or rather, a version of it. I thought it was an important call I was expecting, but it turned out to be some idiot pretending to be the IRS, demanding I buy gift cards. It's truly pathetic that scammers try to deceive people with this nonsense. It disgusts me. I suppose I'll have to reheat my food now. What a waste of time. Shelly gave me a suspicious look as I walked past her towards the kitchen. For added effect, I began whistling a cheerful tune. When I returned to the table, Shelly looked at me with disdain and muttered, "That didn't sound like a call from a scammer." "Oh, so you were eavesdropping? What happened to the privacy lectures you gave me after those recent calls from your sister when I inquired about them?" And yes, I used quotes intentionally. Quotes. When I said sister, we sat in silence for a while, eating, until Shelly put down her fork and said firmly, "I don't want you going on a date with your friend this weekend." She looked at me with intensity. I looked up at her and coolly replied, "And what do you expect me to do while you're on your date? Stay home and knit?" My expression hardened into a sneer, and my voice boomed, "Listen to me very carefully. I have options too. If you want to change the rules of our marriage, you better believe I can and will play as well. We're in an equal partnership. If you want to treat me like a fool and run around with someone else, then let's end this marriage, and you can find some poor sap who will tolerate it." "I won't." Shelly angrily frowned, pushed away from the table, and hissed, "God, why can't you be like Tony Sayers and just accept that your wife wants to have a little fun?" "Tony lets Darcy have her flings." "Well, maybe you should have married Tony Sayers," I retorted. Shelly stormed off to our bedroom and locked herself inside. I sat there and continued eating, but the orange chicken suddenly tasted bland. I packed up the leftover food and put it in the refrigerator. I considered barging into the bedroom and making a scene, but decided it was premature. Perhaps Shelly just needed time to process the impact of my words. I had made my stance clear. Now it was her turn to decide what she truly wanted. My stomach rumbled as I sat on the couch, contemplating. This was undeniably a critical juncture in our marriage. I hoped my reaction to her announcement yesterday would demonstrate how hurtful it was and make her experience the emotions I had felt. Time would tell. I started considering what I ultimately desired. I cared for this unpredictable woman and was increasingly convinced she'd been influenced by the poor advice and unrealistic fantasies of Darcy. This new guy at her work, who'd been giving her flirtatious glances and compliments, could be distracting her from our relationship. I'd had my share of admiring glances and flirtatious attempts directed at me. I may not be a young Antonio Banderas, but I'm not oblivious either. I understand how intoxicating that attention can be. If she continued down this path, we were finished. But I genuinely hoped my dramatic performance had opened her eyes to the other side of the situation. I decided to take action. I researched divorce laws in our state and realized everything would be divided equally since we earned similar incomes. We didn't have children, our house was modest, and we had no significant assets. I completed and printed divorce papers, then researched prenuptial agreements as a way to establish new ground rules, since the dynamics of our relationship were shifting. My trust had been severely shaken. At the very least, we were on the verge of a serious discussion. I was weary of being passive and accommodating. I suspected her declaration yesterday was a test, and that she hadn't yet done anything irreparably damaging to our marriage. However, I wouldn't agree to reconciliation if she had already been unfaithful. I wandered around aimlessly, accomplishing nothing, simply biding my time and giving Shelly space to reflect. Over an hour and a half passed before I heard the bedroom door open. Shelly quietly entered the living room. Her demeanor had shifted, evident in her gait. "Can I talk to you?" she asked, her voice soft and contrite, a stark contrast to the previous night. "Of course. Please sit next to me," I replied, striving for an open and receptive tone. I patted the couch beside me as an invitation. "I've been acting foolishly," she confessed. I almost gasped. How far had this gone? Was it truly over between us? I sat still, barely breathing. "I've been flirting and having lunch with a guy from work, and I told him I'd go on a date with him this weekend. My friend Darcy encouraged me. She's been having affairs for years, even though she's married, and she constantly boasts about how much fun it is. Her husband is aware and allows it. Darcy coached me on how to approach you. I planned an entire speech and even prepared responses to your potential arguments to convince you to let me do something very selfish. I'm sorry. I was shocked when you were happy and immediately agreed," she continued. "I was even more shocked when I found out you had someone waiting to take my place. I was devastated. But how could I argue with that? You hurt me. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep, thinking about how cruel that was of you. And at some point during the night, I realized that's exactly what I had done to you. You didn't pretend to be hurt, but I saw and felt your perspective. You were simply mirroring the situation, and I felt the full impact." She gave a sheepish grin. "You really hit me hard, jerk." Then she continued, "Today, I replayed everything in my head and almost convinced myself that you fabricated it all, until that phone call came. Could you really have done that? When I tried to compose myself, you hit me again with that conversation, and I realized we were on the brink of disaster. I feel like a complete idiot. I married you for many reasons, and every day you live up to my expectations. I was pleased with myself because someone else was complimenting me and playing along. It felt like I was back in school being courted. It was exciting, and I felt special. And then you demonstrated to me that you, too, possess a unique quality, and that the possibility of losing you existed. I find myself unable and unwilling to permit such an outcome. My love and devotion are solely yours. I recently annulled my weekend engagements and unequivocally declared the termination of any association with him. We shall never partake in a romantic outing, and solely for your cognizance, I solemnly avow upon all that I hold sacred that I have never engaged in any physical contact with him. Infidelity was never a part of my actions, though I concede I approached its precipice, and I acknowledge that uncertainties may linger within you due to my conduct last night and the utterances I made. How might I persuade you to rescind your weekend plans and return to my presence, solely and exclusively to me? Tears welled within her eyes, and a sense of respiration finally returned to me. I paused momentarily, recognizing the impossibility of reverting to the state of affairs that existed 2 days prior. A profound rift had emerged between us, one that necessitates traversing. This endeavor will demand effort. Can we reinstate mutual trust? How can we ascertain the genuine intentions of the other? Even if you assert the cancellation of the date, how can I be assured that you are not merely postponing your rendezvous with Jason Marston, or some other contemptible individual, devising an alternative means to execute your betrayal, merely feigning cancellation to induce a reciprocal action from me? How can I be certain? Once trust is fractured, is its restoration attainable? Am I destined to perpetually scrutinize and interrogate you for the duration of our marital union? I articulated these sentiments in an elevated and irate tone, experiencing a sensation akin to suffocation from the intensity of my emotions. She appeared startled and inquired, "So, you possess knowledge of his name? How and when did you acquire this information, and from whom?" I refrained from responding, allowing her to contemplate this revelation. Initially, upon seating herself, she maintained a distance, but subsequently she drew nearer and embraced me tightly. I am remorseful. Could we simply be ourselves for a period, until we navigate this situation? I prefer to abstain from further contemplation on this matter today. It is exceedingly burdensome, she whispered. Let us merely share each other's company tonight, and we shall revisit this tomorrow. I merely desire to experience your proximity, to cling to a vestige of hope that you will not reject me. I apologize for precipitating this circumstance. God, I do not desire its culmination. I implore you. I reclined, permitting her to rest against my chest. We synchronized our breathing, merely embracing in silence. Notwithstanding our physical closeness, the chasm between us persisted. A multitude of issues required addressing, a vast amount to reconstruct, if such a feat were even conceivable. Upon our eventual retirement to bed, she initiated affectionate gestures, yet the chasm remained. I briefly succumbed to slumber, only to be awakened by the sound of her subdued weeping and repeated utterance, "Fool, I am such a confounded fool, Darcy. Why did I heed your counsel?" We slept, but the tension was palpable, and I am cognizant that both of us experienced nocturnal awakenings, profoundly immersed in our respective seas of anguish. The night proved protracted. Thursday loomed as a demanding day of anticipation and reflection. We both departed for our respective places of employment, mutually assenting to engage in a serious and challenging dialogue upon our return home. We concurred to partake solely of the leftover Chinese cuisine from the refrigerator, scarcely touched from the preceding night, abstaining from wine or bourbon, as this discourse necessitated unimpaired lucidity. And thus the moment of reckoning arrived. I placed 2 documents, the divorce papers and the prenuptial agreement, within folders, one labeled A and the other B. I positioned them face down upon the table. Shelly glanced at the folders, then directed her gaze towards me with a hint of apprehension. I met her gaze directly and awaited her initiation. I had resolved that, since she had instigated this turmoil, she should bear the onus of commencing its resolution. She began, "Brace, I am filled with remorse. I deeply regret having opened this door, and I simply desire to close and secure it permanently. Do you believe you can simply forgive and forget, revert to our previous state, and proceed forward? We all err, and I acknowledge having committed a grave one. What is your disposition?" She smiled expectantly, anticipating my response. "No," I replied. She appeared devastated. I continued, "Shelly, over the course of the past few weeks, you have engaged in deception regarding calls from your sister, which were in actuality from a man with whom you intended to engage in infidelity. You confessed to flirtatious behavior, shared lunches, and fostered intimacy with another individual, all while maintaining secrecy from me. Such conduct is unacceptable for one who professes love and fidelity. You have instilled doubt regarding my future ability to trust you. I perceive only 2 alternatives." I retrieved and presented her with the folder designated A. Option A is an agreement to which we both adhere, delineating our comprehension of mutually acceptable behavior. It is relatively stringent for both of us. If we are unable to reach a consensus, then there is option B, which is simply a divorce. Our material possessions are limited, so we can readily divide everything equally and pursue separate paths. "Divorce?" Shelly shrieked. "No, no, you cannot be serious. I cannot exist without you. Forgive me. I beseech you, forgive me." I allowed her time to compose herself. "Shelly, I do not desire that outcome either, but I am resolute. If we cannot agree upon a method to reconstruct mutual trust—" Shelly whimpered, "What about you? I am aware that you misrepresented that telephone call yesterday. It was not a scam call." Her eyes narrowed. "You perceive, trust is arduous to rebuild once shattered. We shall address that call in a few minutes, subsequent to reaching an accord, designated as Option A. Can we at least concur to collaborate on drafting a mutually satisfactory agreement?" I wish to emphasize that this agreement is something we both need to adhere to. Shelly took her copy of the agreement and muttered something about the utter absurdity of all these formalities. Wow, this is exceedingly strict. The telephone must perpetually remain operational, with the tracking application activated, so that each of us can monitor the other's whereabouts at all times, she mumbled. If you depart from your place of employment, dispatch a text message to your spouse about your destination and estimated return time, and ensure your phone remains activated with the tracking application. Be prepared for your spouse to arrive unannounced at that location to verify your whereabouts. Damn. If you venture anywhere after work or at any other time without your spouse, ensure you specify your exact destination and maintain your phone's operational status. Oh, right, I comprehend. Our leash is considerably short. I genuinely hope we can eventually attain a point where we both deem these measures superfluous. She set aside her copy and regarded me intently. I find it difficult to believe we have reached this juncture, but I understand. I am remorseful for having inflicted pain upon you and causing you to distrust me. Fundamentally, I concur with everything, but I desire to incorporate a few additional points emphasizing positivity, such as dedicating more time to each other, engaging in dates exclusively for the two of us, and genuinely communicating about all matters, our activities, emotions, and aspirations. I aspire for us to become stronger. I desperately yearn for us to overcome this adversity. I could not restrain a smile and expressed my agreement. We implemented a few alterations, and both affixed our signatures to our new agreement. Shelly exhibited a whimsical grin and remarked, "Perhaps we should append a clause stipulating our mutual commitment to engaging in passionate intimacy with great regularity, thereby rendering us either excessively fatigued or enamored to contemplate external involvements." We incorporated that as an amendment. As I previously mentioned, she has prevailed in numerous debates. She rose from the table, approached, and seated herself upon my lap. The kisses she bestowed were impassioned, brimming with love and hope. Assure me that our future is secure and that you still desire my presence as your wife. I cupped her face in my hands and affirmed, I very much still desire you as my wife. I believe we shall be all right. However, I wish to be apprised of that telephone conversation, she resolutely declared, whereupon I retrieved my phone and played the recording for her. Oh my God, you are a cunning rogue. Remind me never again to engage in conflict with you, you scoundrel, she playfully retorted, lightly striking me, giggling, and embracing me for another kiss. In accordance with our newly established agreement, passionate intimacy was to ensue immediately. Indeed, that was explicitly articulated in writing. Several months have elapsed since that fateful Thursday. We have maintained a harmonious relationship, only occasionally referencing the stipulations of the agreement, with the notable exception of the intimate aspect, which has been exceedingly frequent, and has, in fact, fostered greater closeness between us. Appearing unannounced at a few luncheon meetings and amiably greeting my wife, who embraces me affectionately and introduces me to everyone, has yielded substantial dividends. We allocate significantly more time to each other and engage in unrestricted communication. Life is good. We were situated upon the couch, deliberating plans for the impending 3-day weekend, when Shelly's phone rang. She furrowed her brow and quietly muttered, I wonder why my boss is contacting me so late in the evening. Hello, Betty. What a surprise. Is all well? Some conversation emanated from the phone, but I could not discern the specifics. Shelly gasped, You are jesting. When did this occur? Further indistinct murmuring from the phone. Wow, that is incredible. I shall promptly communicate with my team and convene with you tomorrow at precisely 7 o'clock a.m. in the main conference room. Understood. Good night, Betty. Shelly terminated the call and sat silently, staring at her phone with a profoundly concerned expression. What has transpired, my dear? You appear startled. Are you well? Shelly looked at me with the same worried expression and replied, Tomorrow morning, All human resources personnel are required to attend a meeting to be apprised of alterations in leadership policies that were mandated by the legal counsel to reinforce the company's fraternization policy. It appears Darcy was discovered in a compromising situation at home with Jason Marston. Her husband, Tony, unexpectedly entered the premises, whereupon Jason commenced a verbal assault, insulting Tony and deriding him. I presume Tony reached a breaking point, forcibly removed Jason from the house by his hair, in a state of nudity, and proceeded to assault him brutally. Jason is currently hospitalized, and his prognosis is uncertain. His facial injuries are severe, and he is likely to lose at least one eye. Darcy attempted to intervene but was inadvertently struck down and sustained the loss of several teeth in the altercation. She, too, is hospitalized. Tony is incarcerated. I raised an eyebrow, observing Shelly. She met my gaze and raised her hand, gesturing for me to refrain. Do not articulate it. Please do not verbalize your thoughts. I comprehend. I was on the verge of emulating Darcy's descent into that perilous abyss. It appears Tony did not react to her behavior as favorably as she had anticipated. Damn it, I could not remain silent. Based on my knowledge of Darcy and Tony, they are somewhat older than us, and Tony likely stood to forfeit considerably more in a divorce than we would at this earlier stage of our relationship. Perhaps that accounts for his prolonged silence and ultimate eruption. I conjecture he finally reached his breaking point. Shelly merely nodded slightly, playfully punched me in the chest, and remarked, I requested that you refrain from commenting. I chuckled at her reaction, but I could not suppress a sense of dismay that 3 lives were ruined because a couple of selfish individuals desired to circumvent the established norms. I am gratified that we are not ensnared in a similar predicament. I can only hope that we have both gleaned wisdom from their transgressions. For the time being, our modus operandi has evolved, but perhaps a juncture will arrive when we can once more abide by the former precepts. Thank you for your attentive listening until the conclusion. I shall see you in the subsequent installment of English Epic. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Goodbye.